get started this morning, and we jumped in last week at the first time that Jesus begins to kind of share with his followers. They call it the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus sees a large crowd, and he sits down, which indicates he has authority, and he begins to communicate. And what I love about Jesus is he's trying to shift the way we view what God is doing. Because we tend to kind of assume that God is doing what we can see. And especially our comparison to government or kingdom. Maybe in our world, it's not necessarily kingdom is a familiar experience, but government, and I think what Jesus is trying to do is unpack what God is doing. And that what God is doing sometimes is very contrary to what we experience from maybe our world or our government or rulers or any type of those situations. And so Jesus is trying to unpack something beautiful for us. And so we're going to spend some time in this first message that Jesus preaches. And my hope is that we get to see what we're a part of and how awesome it is. And that God is moving towards you with goodness. And I love how the first indication that Jesus begins to relay to us of what God's kingdom looks like is that he starts with the word goodness. And I find it so interesting why Jesus says what he says sometimes. Because if I was God and I was trying to help us people, I probably wouldn't start with goodness. If anything, I would start with telling people what's wrong. Because that just seems to be better. For instance, this one time when I was driving on 620, as I was driving down 620, and we all know what these roads do in Austin to us. I think ultimately the real issue is that why would you allow us to experience freeway speeds and then put stoplights in the roads? Like, I feel like this is an oxymoron and confusing to us regular people. If you've ever been to any other state, we have freeways where we allow you to go freely without putting stop signs on the road. But we prefer on 620 and 360 that there should be stoplights everywhere. But we'll allow you to feel like you're on a freeway, just to kind of mess with your head. And so there I am driving down 620, minding my own business, by the way, just enjoying the world around me, singing and worshiping the Lord with everything that's in me. And I head down and I'm turning left on 71. It's a 2-lane turn left. And I happen to be on the outside lane turning left onto 71. So there's 2 cars. And the car next to me, as we turn, I cut in front of him. And he honks his horn. Well, there's something about the sound of a horn that just does things to my spiritual man. and I feel so inclined to respond. If you're going to use your horn, then I need to respond in kind. And so therefore, as he pulls up next to me, he's got his window down to share with me that I've cut him off and that I turned into the wrong lane. So thus, being a great pastor that I am of a wonderful church so spiritual and holy, I roll down my window to share my thoughts with him. And the crazy thing about the whole thing is that Pastor Carl, who sits on the front row, is my dad and is the most spiritual man that I've ever met in my life and would never hurt a fly. I'm on the phone with him. So I have him on the phone as I put the phone down slightly to allow myself to share my heart with the man next to me of how he's wrong and I'm right. And you know, there's something about how that just feels good. I think in our society, it's kind of become the thing to do. that we need to share with people that when they're wrong, because we just need to let them know. Because somehow if we let them know, magically I know that they'll change. So when I rolled down my window, guess what his response was? It was not, "You're right." And if you're here this morning and listening to a pastor share his faults with you offends you, I'm sorry. Because that's what I experience all the time. I need Jesus. And what was interesting is as I shared my thoughts with him, it didn't want to change him. And then as he shared his thoughts with me, it didn't want to change me either. Yet, here we are, driving down the road, yelling at each other as we're trying to get back up to speed. Yeah. I share this with my head held low and my Expression Church sticker on the back of my truck. Weeks go by. I travel down the same road, and I thought to myself, I felt like I was right, but I should just check. Just confirm my thoughts to see which lane was supposed to go into what lane when you turn left. Don't you hate it when you're wrong? And I love how sometimes we just decide to take a stand on something that we have really no idea about, but we're going to die on that hill. If you've ever been married, this happens in relationships. My wife and I have this thing called the calendar. And it's always fun to figure out whose fault it was of why something didn't get put on the calendar. Nobody wants to take the blame. Babe, it's your fault. You should have done that. No, honey, I told you. Who did you tell? What conversation? I don't remember this conversation. And on it goes. And yet, we have not experienced change. We continue to go down these roads with one another thinking that it's the amount of information and by telling people how wrong they are that somehow that they'll come to conclusion of what they need to do to change. So we're more concerned about what people see than how they see. So if we tell you what you should see, it should cause you to want to change. But none of us have ever changed because someone told us what to see. And this morning, I want to get into this second part of this passage of Scripture where Jesus begins to indicate what his kingdom looks like, because I believe he's really talking about something that actually creates change in the earth. And I want to start by a verse in Romans 12:21. The writer of this is writing to the church in Rome, and he ends this great chapter on impact, on how to change the world around us with one of the most profound verses that I've read. And I love the way he words it. And this is what it says. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. The indication here is that what actually changes who we are. What makes the difference in our life? By the way, the evil that has been done to me, I cannot respond to anyone coming at me because all it does is create an animosity inside of me to respond. If you've ever been responded to negatively, and that's been the pattern, typically that becomes our response. So what we do is we just propitiate the problem rather than experiencing the solution. And what we've done in our society now is that we've created social media as a form of avenue for us to pontificate our thoughts to everyone. And now we feel like that it's the amount of information. We have a generation that's been raised on Google, so we know more than any previous generation ever, and yet we find ourselves in more trouble than we've ever been. So it's not the amount of information or me telling you what's wrong, because we all have a problem of seeing. And so how do we help each other see better? And I believe this morning that Jesus is indicating to us today that His goodness is what leads us to a place that we've never been before, and that His kingdom is God moving towards us with kindness. And so He starts off in Matthew chapter 4, verses 23 through chapter 5, verse 6, and I want to read that together as we get started. It says, Jesus, traveling throughout the region of Galilee, teaching in the synagogue and announcing the what? The good news about the kingdom, God's rule, what He's doing in the earth. So whatever it is that He's doing, it's good. And there's good news that follows it. And so what did He do? As He announces this, He begins to move towards people, healing every kind of disease and illness. News about Him spread as far as Syria, and people soon began bringing to Him all who were sick. And whatever their sickness or disease was, or if they were demon-possessed or epileptic or paralyzed, He healed them all. Large crowds followed Him wherever He went, and people from Galilee, the 10 towns, Jerusalem, and all over Judea, and from the east of the Jordan River. I just want to pause there. Jesus wants to move towards you today, and He wants to demonstrate His love to you. And if there's something that you have maybe come to where you've lost hope in, or you feel like it can never change, I want to tell you that God is moving towards you. He's announcing the good news of the kingdom, and He wants to move in your life and do what you thought was impossible. Verse 5, one day as He saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up to the mountainside and sat down. That indicates that He had authority. When a religious leader or someone, a teacher sat down, that means they were really telling the truth. Sorry, I stand the whole time. His disciples gathered around Him. That's because I can't sit, because I get antsy. And He began to teach them. Verse 3, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for Him. For the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. We talked about this last week. If you didn't get a chance to hear it, please go online and check it out. But I believe that these first two verses indicate the position of the kingdom. There's two aspects to this position: our response to God's initiation. The indication is this: the more you lean on God, He won't disappoint you. It's contrary to our world. We cannot lean on anybody, it seems, these days. I might want to lean on you, but eventually you're going to let me down as much as you try, because we actually cannot meet each other's needs. And so He indicates here, the way the kingdom works is the more you lean on God, He will give you what you didn't even know could come your way. So consider it that you are poor. You have nothing else to lean on, and you got nothing else to prove. So you're just going to give it all to God, and you're going to find He's going to take care of you. And then He indicates the next verse, which is mourning. This idea of loss. If you've lost something of great value, nothing can actually take the place of that loss. No matter what you go to in this life, and you find that even as a child loses a parent, that goes with them their whole life. You can't replace a loss. And what He says is that I'm the one thing that you can come to in that place, and I will give you comfort for that which you seek. And I love the position of the kingdom is the more you lean on Him, the more He has for you. And then today, I want to get into the attitude of the kingdom. I think attitude is interesting and it's contagious, right? And there's all sorts of different types of attitude, but Jesus wants to indicate the attitude that actually brings about change. And so he goes in his next two verses, and this is what he says in verse 4. Verse 5. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the what? Okay, I'm emphasizing this. We'll get to it in a little bit. But he says, blessed, happy, that's the word blessed in this context. It means happy are those who are humble, for they will inherit not just a piece, not just a portion, but the whole earth will be theirs. Wow. And then the next indication, he says, God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. Jesus begins to indicate here as the attitude of the kingdom of where real power comes from. We don't understand this because humility in our mind is that idea of lowering oneself and becoming a doormat. And if I become a doormat, who will fight for what I believe? Who will take care of what I need taken care of? I cannot lower myself because then people will walk over me. This idea of humility is almost disturbing. We can comprehend the thought of it, but the reality of it makes us uncomfortable. And then we kind of lean towards, well, it's a personality thing. That person's just a little bit more humble in their personality because they just don't really got anything going on. But if you got something going on, hello. You just got something going on. So it's always important for us as we begin to identify and define what something looks like that we go back to the way Jesus did it. And so in Philippians chapter 2, this is the indication of what humility really looks like. Philippians chapter 2 says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble in thinking of others as better than yourself. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in other too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privilege. Listen, I'm stopping there for a second because this makes no sense. The Creator does not do anything for the created. On the contrary, the created are the ones that need to respond to the created. We should be humble in our response to God because he's God and we are not. Period, exclamation point. This is what is so profound in this text. Is that it says, though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privilege and he took the humble position of a... Now, if you've been in church for some time, this is like one of those verses that we all like, yay, it's awesome. But it is mind-boggling for me to comprehend that the Creator would humble himself to become a slave to the crazy humankind. Have you watched us lately? We are weird. Because true humility equals power. In the kingdom, humility is actually what brings about change. Because Jesus became our slave because he wasn't trying to tell us what to see. That would have been easy, and he should have, because he's God. And we have no idea what the cosmos looks like. or when He created and spoke things into existence, how it came about. We would love to, and we think that the amount of information that we have allows us to walk into the room and expect people's heads to turn. That's what we do with knowledge. It puffs us up, and we think that it's our right to tell people what's really going on. I'm the only one that knows. By the way, if any preacher tells you that, run for your life. Typically, what's next is juice you're going to drink. So Jesus, in the response of how to change the human race, decides that it's not about telling us what to see, but helping us to see. Because when you help someone see, you change them forever. If you tell them what they should see, most of the time your response will be your response when someone's driving down 620 and tells you what they saw. Maybe you're better than I, probably, and you never respond this way. But what we indicate in this verse is that power equals, or humility equals power, and that it means me putting myself aside because I recognize that it's not about telling you what to see, but helping you see, which means I may have to respond different in the moment because you are more valuable than my rights or what I want or what I think. This is impossible if it weren't first the position of the kingdom. I just keep leaning on Jesus. So what I got, He gave to me. I can't even keep it. I can't even strive one more day to make anything happen. I just keep leaning on Jesus. The position of the kingdom allows me to operate in the attitude of the kingdom. Because I realize I didn't get here because I was awesome. Or I put knowledge together, which allowed me to figure it out. How do I start a church? Well, it's A, B, C, and D. And if you do those things real well, everyone will come. And sometimes I find more people are leaving than they've ever left before. And so it's not a matter of stringing information together. It's a matter of putting ourselves in a position where we act like Jesus, where He cared more for us and moved His life into a way where He helped us see. Watch. Look what happened. Go back to that Philippians verse. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When He appeared in human form, He humbled Himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on the cross. He was willing to look wrong to help us see. This idea of humility has been working on me. Because I think ultimately where it boils down to is who's going to take care of me and what I need if I don't take care of it myself. Because nobody's looking out for me. And I love that Jesus doesn't forget where we really are. So His promise is that if you live a life of humility, helping people see, not just telling them what to see, like Him towards us, that we will inherit just our little sliver of paradise. Jesus doesn't use words accidentally. We will inherit the whole. I love whole things. My children always want a sample of my French fries. I want all of the French fries. If you take one, that's one less for me. We have to change that thinking. If you take one, God has more from me that you know not of, that I'll receive. And even though the fries may be gone, He's got my back. That's good news. Last and finally, the second part to this is those that hunger and thirst for justice shall be satisfied. This word is not an indication of us telling the world what is wrong with them. When we hear the word justice, that's what we think. But the word actually indicates what God is doing. And so our food, what we hunger for is becoming aware of what God is doing in our surroundings. If you put them together, it's this. You may come at me in one way, evil, but I see what God is doing in you, and I respond in goodness. And because I do, that which is in me that needs to be filled will be satisfied. Because nothing can satisfy me, no fame, no fortune, no time, no energy, no relationship can give me what I need. And yet we spend our life looking for it. But when we become people who try to see what God is doing, it allows us to move towards people, and we care more about helping them see rather than telling them what to see. And it becomes what changes the earth. So not only will I inherit way more than I give, I will be satisfied in ways you can't even comprehend. Go ahead. Go try to satisfy yourself. See how much TV, how much money, how much stuff you can accumulate. You will find in relationships you will still be empty. But Jesus indicated something that was far greater that His disciples still couldn't comprehend. As He was standing with a woman who was rejected, and He spent time helping her see, His followers went off to get food, and they come back and they're like, Jesus, aren't you hungry? Don't you need what we can provide for you? And He's like, no. You know what satisfies me? Is seeing what my Father is doing and being a part of that in someone's life. And so sometimes it means I've got to respond different. It may mean I need to give, or I need to help, or I need to stand, or I need to be silent, or I need to sit, because it's not about me and what I can get from this, because I'm getting it in ways that no one could fathom. It's the name of Jesus. It's the life of Jesus. It's His kingdom where He gives to those who lean and will never be disappointed in Him, which allows me to respond to His humility towards me. I care about how you see. So here's the deal. It's even for us as preachers. I've made a commitment to you that I never stand up here to tell you what you need to hear. We can develop messages all day, and you may be out there going, man, I got a message for some of these people. They need to hear what I got to say. Us pontificating information hasn't changed the world up to this point, and we got more information than we've ever had, even good information. But moving towards people and helping them see, through maybe it means that I got to tell you some of my silly stories. Because it's not about making me higher in your eyes. If anything, I want to disappear so that Jesus can appear brighter to you. And if you want to know what kind of culture I want to build in a church, is I want to build that kind of culture. Because it's the way He moves towards us. how do we disperse evil? By moving towards each other with good. So as we respond here today, I just want to let you know that the Father is moving towards you in ways you can't even comprehend. That Jesus was willing to put everything aside to show you how to see. And for many of us, that journey is still continuing. I have a hard time believing that He's got my back sometimes. I want to put some stakes in the ground. I want to defend myself. I want to argue whether it's this or that. And all of those arguments actually produce in people's life is an animosity towards those who know. And so maybe we start acting a little bit more like Jesus and a little bit less like ourselves. And we'll actually see the world be changed. And how do we do that? Keep leaning. Keep surrendering. Keep coming. And He'll remind you, because He moves towards you with goodness. I got you. Would you stand with me?